This is Our People podcast, telling the stories behind South Tyneside and Sunderland NHS Foundation Trust.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Our People podcast. My name is Liz Davies and I'm the Director of Communications here at South Tyneside and Sunderland NHS Foundation Trust. I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by our new chair, Allison Thompson. Welcome, Allison. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
I say new, but it's actually been 6 months now since you became our new chair of the organisation. So we're going to have a conversation today just to get to know a little bit more about you and for people listening to find out more about you as a person and what, I guess, the role of the chair does within the organisation. So lots of things for us to cover. We'll just get stuck in, if that's all right.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to do this.
Very welcome. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself first then, Alison? So, a bit about your background, how you came to be involved with the NHS.
Okay, sometimes I really wonder how I've ended up doing what I'm doing today. So my background is I was born in Wardley, Gateshead, but went to school in South Tyneside. So I'm a St Joseph's girl, so there'll be lots of people probably who would know St Joseph's. And when I left there, I went to Teesside University and did business and economics. Had never done business and economics before, so that was all new to me, but I've kind of learned along the way that I really like to push myself out of my comfort zone. Fortunately, I think I became quite good at it, and I had some options to look at marketing, finance or HR, and actually I've probably done a combination of all of those things, but my real passion was marketing. So that's where my career really started. And as soon as I graduated, I joined Northern Rock, which was a building society at the time. Went through quite considerable change to become a bank. And as everybody would know, it went through quite considerable change during the financial crisis, and Northern Rock kind of led the way during that really difficult period, which started for Northern Rock in 2007. While the bank was really successful, I was for 7 years the marketing director, keeping very customer focused and creating new products was the mainstay of what I did, and getting out really great communications. So that is really my background and my bag. After the bank collapsed, I became the Chief Operating Officer and the HR director. So I got very much involved in the leadership and then the splitting of the bank and deciding strategically where we were going before we handed the keys over to Virgin Money.
Wow, quite a varied portfolio and really big issues you had to manage and deal with there.
Yeah.
How did you then become involved in, the NHS from that background?
Yeah, so I left Northern Rock when we handed the keys over to Virgin Money to take the bank forward. They were really keen to keep me, but I thought, I'd had 5 years of very high profile crisis management in many respects. So I was the lead person in looking at the strategic change and working with the Bank of England, the regulator, and also the Treasury at the time. So I left in January 2012. I thought at that time I would retire, even though I was only in my mid-40s. My husband always said I probably wouldn't, and he was right. So a couple of months later, I was approached by a number of people to ask me would I join their boards or do different things, and I resisted it for quite a while till the big one came along, which was the NHS in South Tyneside. And I felt really drawn to that for a whole host of reasons. The first one was I had both of my children at South Tyneside maternity unit, and I really feel passionate about the values of the NHS, and I thought, wow, this is something entirely different to what I'd done before, but I just felt the draw to be a public servant as well after what I'd done previously, and really wanted to support the population within South Tyneside and give something back.
And this was before we merged and before we became South Tyneside and Sunderland Foundation Trust. So you were involved with the previous South Tyneside Foundation Trust, is that right?
Yeah. Yes,
So you go way back.
I go way back, yes. So it's now 10 years since
Wow.
I've earned my NHS spurs, really.
Wow, I think you must get a pin badge for that or something. So now you're our chair, which you took on that role from April this year. What does a chair actually do for people listening who might not be, I guess, familiar? They'll know, we have a chair as the organisation, but what does a chair of a big organisation like a foundation trust do? What does your day job look like, and what are the things you have to manage and deal with?
Okay, so the chair is very different to a non-exec director, because that's the role that I had at South Tyneside, and also when post-merger, I had that role in the South Tyneside and Sunderland merged foundation trust. The role of a chair, I think, is more public, and I'm very much working in partnership with the chairs in the rest of the region. So that's a big part of the role that I do, and I've gone out and about and introduced myself to all of the other chairs as well, just to say hello and really understand from a strategic point of view what keeps them awake at night within their own trusts. So I've met with Newcastle, Northumbria, Gateshead, and I've got a whole host of different people to see as well within Teesside. I've also met with Durham as well. So that is a big part of the job, kind of being the external face at a regional partnership level. But I guess the biggest part of the job is about leadership within the organisation and making sure that as a board we have the right mix of people on that board, with different people from different backgrounds with different skills, knowledge and expertise to bring to the board. So our role is to remain totally independent from the organisation, but at the same time make sure that we are delivering our strategic objectives. And I'm sure we'll get onto it, but I know we've just launched our 5-year strategy. And we were very much involved in that. And our role is very much as a leadership role to ensure that all of the different parts of the trust, and bearing in mind we're 2 acute hospitals, we're an eye infirmary, we're community services, and we actually work in partnership with the local authorities as well that we serve as well. So sometimes I think when people think, oh, you work for a hospital, they just immediately think of the big hospital, which is Sunderland, which of course is incredibly important. But I guess it gives me a dimension, because I've come from South Tyneside, to really think about kind of the wider population and the community services, which have always been outstanding, I'm very proud to say.
Absolutely. I think it's an interesting point you raised there, because many people, when they think about the NHS, there's a fixation and people tend to think about hospitals, but most of the care that we deliver, not only as a trust, but in primary care as well, it's outside the hospital buildings. But it's interesting that you should say that as well. So you mentioned, I guess, just sticking on the role of chair. So I guess you work closely with Ken, the chief executive, and the other directors of the board. Can you say a little bit about the work you do with the Council of Governors as well, for people who might not understand how that works, that are listening? Because that's an important, I guess, part of the role of a chair as well, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. So my appointment, I went through an appointments procedure and an interview, and the appointment is actually by the governors. So the governors sit above the board and hold us to account for delivering our services to the publics that we serve. And I think that is a really good thing, because it keeps us very accountable. So for me, the role of the governors, and I chair the board of governors as well as chairing the board of the trust as well, but we wear slightly different hats when we actually do that. So they are an incredibly important constituent part, so they're represented from both South Tyneside and Sunderland, but also Gateshead and Durham as well, because we provide services into both of those localities as well. And it's incredibly important that we see them as a representation of the public that we serve, because actually ultimately that's what we're about. And they hold us to account for delivering great services, safe services, and engendering a really good culture in our organisation that enables people to be open and honest and transparent and come to work really wanting to do their very best every day. So that's really the role of my job, is to make sure that all of that governance is fully transparent for everybody to see, but really works well.
Absolutely. And you mentioned there that people, and I think this is a common theme that we see in the NHS and people that work in the NHS, that they're generally very passionate about what they do and wanting to serve the public and help people. Can we talk a little bit about our staff?
Yeah,
I know since you've become the chair, you've been out and about and met lots of colleagues, and I guess we've been through a really, really difficult few years with the pandemic and heading into a winter period. The pressures on the services across all parts of the organisation are just relentless and growing year on year. And it's the staff that keep that all going day to day. What have you, when you've been out and about, what have you felt from some of the staff? What conversations have you had? And I guess what message would you like to give them today when they're listening?
So what I love about going out and about is that people are very keen to talk to you and they tell you everything. And I love it. I really love it, because we're not just here to hear this positive sound bites, and I don't expect people to sweep up before us coming in and show us just the best foot forward. And what I've always found in the 10 years that I've actually been on an NHS board is that people are genuinely honest and will tell you how it is. And that is the real benefit of getting out and about and speaking to people in their own workplace and meeting people where they are day in, day out. So I hear people are tired. I'm in huge admiration of the resilience that people have shown during the pandemic. And it feels sometimes that we've gone from the glory days of people standing on their doorsteps and clapping and banging their pans to kind of a business as usual. And in certain areas, I think there's aspects that disturb me about some of the challenges that our staff have to face from members of the public. Not just, and this is where I used to think, does it just happen in our emergency departments in A&E and things like that? But actually it's not, it's day in, day out. And so I think the resilience and the way that people continue to manage our patients in some difficult environments, I think we can't kind of skirt around those types of issues. I really get it. And we have to do the best we can to protect our staff and to work with our staff to deliver the best outcomes for our patients. But the thing that really kind of, gets to me is how compassionate and how incredibly diligent our staff are day in, day out. And I see that in spades, not just when I go out and visit, but actually because I live in the local area and always have done. I've got friends, family, and my own family are service users as well.
Absolutely.
And you just see the wonderful stuff that goes in, day out. And the one thing I would say to staff is never, ever forget the impact that you have on the patients that you look at, on the colleagues that you share the same kind of wards with or offices with, or, the same challenges with day in, day out. Because, at the heart of it, and we know people have tough lives and they have to leave that behind and step through the front door and care for our communities that we serve. And it's not just in hospital, as I've said, it's people who walk into people's houses. Mm-hmm. At times that can be really, really challenging to walk in the middle of people in crises, because we deal with people who are incredibly sick or incredibly challenged at different parts of their life. And we have to do it with a smile on our face, and we have to do it in the way that, we live into the values that we set out for the Trust. And I just totally applaud all of our staff who do that day in, day out. and leave their own problems behind to be able to do that as well. And I totally recognise that.
Here. You mentioned there about our values, and I guess one of the things we've tried to do as a trust over the past few years in particular is put a real focus on staff health and well-being, and that's come through hopefully loud and clear in our new strategy that we've launched as well. Can we talk a little bit around that and the work we've done to launch that strategy, because that really has come from what we've heard from staff and putting the focus on, you know, what's going to make their lives easier when they are having to deal with such pressures.
Yeah. So just to give a little bit of background, so this is at the heart of everything that I have spent my previous corporate life doing, is about kind of how do we work with people to be the best they can be every day to get the best results for either the organisations that we've worked with and now within the NHS. So I'm absolutely passionate about that, because we cannot deliver the best service to our either customers, if you're in that world, or our patients, unless you feel good in yourself and you feel well supported and you feel well valued. And there's tons of research around this that I really feel passionate about. And one of my other jobs is that I'm a personal development coach, but I've actually taken that out into different areas, and it's not just executives that I work with, but it's people who are in real need of support in delivering and developing their jobs. And I can talk about some of the stuff that I've done in Africa.
Wow.
And around the wider world, and some incredible lessons to be learned about the simplicity of their lives and how complicated our lives all are. But I feel really passionate about it, and it's just been really heartwarming to see the work that you, Liz, and the team that you've done in listening and doing listening events, because we can't put health and wellbeing strategies in for our staff. We don't know what it is that they want, and we have to listen hard. And I think that's a real skill. And I think all of our everybody, whether you're a leader in this organisation, I talk about leadership at all levels, by the way. I don't think leadership is the top of an organisation. Everyone in the organisation is a leader. You lead your patients, you lead your colleagues, everything that you do. So we need to support people in that culture to be great leaders in everything that they do, whichever area of the operations that you work in. So listening is the first thing, and I'm delighted to see the Let's Talk events being so successful and people turning up to that. As I said, when I'm out and about, people don't hold back in telling us what they think. We can just kind of pick the good bits out of that, but hopefully my brand of chairmanship, if I can call it that with my marketing hat on, would be to really listen hard and listen to what people are saying, and then supporting people in whatever packages of support. And some of that can be really acute stuff where people are really struggling, but some of it is just about kind of supporting people to be their best when they walk through the front door every day.
Absolutely, yeah. I think, you know, thank you for your comments there. That the stuff we try to do with the team talk is exactly what you're saying there. So making sure that we're listening all the time. It's not just a one-off, that we build that culture of really listening to what staff are going through and what we can do to adapt and change and support people. I just picked up on a word you said there, which is going to lead me nicely into my next question, when you said chairmanship. But I think you're probably quite unique as a woman chair in the NHS. I'm not sure about the corporate world. Perhaps there's more female leaders in that sphere, but you've had a very successful and influential, I guess, role as a senior woman leader. What challenges have you faced along the way as a woman at the top of your game, if you like, and what advice would you give to any people listening, bearing in mind that the majority of the NHS workforce, I think, is a female, certainly in our trust, a female-dominated landscape?
Yeah. Sometimes it's not easy, because I think still a lot of the family responsibilities fall onto females as well. It's not always the case, but it's often the case, certainly my case. And I think, so I've got two boys who are now in their 20s, but obviously at the ascendancy of my career. My boys were young and small, and you have to make choices about whether you go to their play or their carol concert, and those are really, really tough choices when you're a mum, and you have to do all of those things as well. But the rewards, I think, can be really substantial, because I think when we talk about equality and diversity, I think having a female voice around a senior leadership table is really important. I think often we bring a different perspective. I think often we can think slightly differently to our male colleagues. And I've got to say, I have never felt ostracised in anything that I've done, even in the big bad corporate world that I've come from. And just to give you a flavour of some of the stuff I did in Northern Rock wasn't just kind of turning up in Gosforth and doing a job internally, but I actually travelled the world selling the Northern Rock story and selling corporate bonds to the financial markets, and that was very heavily male dominated. But I think, like anything, if you work hard at what you do and you don't try to be something you're not, so authenticity is a really important value, I would say. Don't try and pretend you're a man when you're not.
Yeah.
You're a female with some real strong attributes to bring, and I think if you just kind of be yourself every day, but bring your best self every day, I think that's the thing that I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Over 80% of our workforce are female. I'm really proud to work in an organisation that has that, but I do recognise it's tough because we have to wear multiple hats. I'll give you a story. When I went when we went through the financial crisis, I was the only female at the senior leadership table at that time, and people were camping out in the office because we had lots of big pressures at the time. You'll remember when there was queues round the block.
I do.
When people were trying to take their money out. That was a very, very high-pressured environment and organisation. I couldn't simply camp out in an office. I had my kids at home, and I have a very supportive husband, but, I still had big responsibilities at home. And so it felt like there was a bit of a macho thing to kind of do those types of things. And I thought, I can be much more of an extraordinary leader if I get some balance back in this. So because I had to, I did. Mm-hmm. But that really centred me, because actually it reminded me that whilst we were going through all of this, my family is the most important thing. And I think it keeps you grounded. And I think as a female, those types of kind of reminders keep you grounded, but give you balance back. And I think the next day I came into work and I had way more energy than lots of other people. So I think just reminding yourself and really having to kind of keep your feet on the ground, because you have to wear so many hats, really gives you an edge in business. And I think it gives you an edge strategically as well. There is one other chair in the region.
Right,
and
okay.
That's at Gateshead.
Of course.
And she happens to be called Allison as well.
Oh, wow.
So she's
it's a recurring theme.
It's a recurring theme. So she's called Allison Marshall, and I have met with her as well. She comes from a legal background, very different background to me, but it's great that we have at least one other female chair in the region.
And I suppose it's not just about females or males, but we've put a lot of focus as well around equality and inclusivity, diversity across the whole organisation. Yeah. So having representation from all different groups of people, not only on the board and the exec team, but in all of our teams. And I really, what you just said there about don't change who you are really struck a chord with me. Don't try and be something you're not. So I guess as an organisation, we value everybody's input and worth, and we'll encourage everybody to follow their aspirations.
100%, and I couldn't say that more passionately than the way I feel about it. I think, just being a representative of the wider community, I think makes me really proud, particularly within the NHS. I'm sure Ngozi won't mind me saying, But she has a Nigerian background.
Do you want to just explain who Ngozi is for people who might not appreciate?
Oh, great
Yeah,
thing.
so, yeah.
She's our vice chair.
Yeah.
And she actually, so I interviewed her when we were looking for an independent non-executive director for Stickle, which looks after Haven Court.
Yes.
And I was the chair of the holdings company for Haven Court. And that was our first foray into kind of the care sector. And again, I'm really proud to say that we took a big decision at South Tyneside, and that has helped the hospital in terms of throughput of the hospital. But we were looking for an independent chair, and Ngozi stood out for me at that time when we went for the interviews for that. And then she came onto the board at South Tyneside, and also came onto the board when we merged as well. And she's just a great colleague to have as my right-hand woman as
Absolutely.
well as vice chair of the trust.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and has a great skill set in terms of all of her background in the charitable sector and all of the work that she's done. So,
Absolutely. So she's got just a fantastic background, and you should do a podcast with
well, there's our
Ngozi
next
as well.
our
So
next
there you
guest.
go, I'm sure.
If she's listening, we're coming to see you next. Okay, let's just move on to some other areas then. Can we talk a little bit about, because clearly you've got your role here in the NHS and everything you're doing for the Trust, but I know that you're also involved with lots of work across the city of Sunderland, in particular in terms of the regeneration and the redevelopment of the city. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? Because actually that's really important for us as a Trust as well, in terms of, I guess, attracting people to come to the city.
Yeah, so if I take you back to 2012 when I finished at Northern Rock, all of my business contacts at that time had been very Newcastle centric and Newcastle focused, because that's where our business was located in Gosforth. So at that time I was on the board of the Newcastle Gateshead initiative, I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce, etc, etc. But I'd had very little to do with the business community in Sunderland at that time, even though we had our office in Duxford. And I guess the only time I really kind of touched the business community in the south of the region was when the bank was in crisis at that time, and how we were managing that, because that became a much wider regional job. But I was really pleased to be invited to come along to a business group within Sunderland and hear a little bit about how the business community was coming together with the support of the local authority, but was really trying to drive change in the city. And change meant real transformational change. And so I came along to a couple of those meetings, and it was great because I felt as if I was incognito as well, because not many people knew me at the time. So that was a great experience. But because I had some time on my hands, I volunteered to do a couple of things. And the first thing I did was to work with my colleagues to set up a business improvement district. And that was critically important because they are legal entities. They started their life, I was reminded at a meeting this morning, in New York.
Wow.
And they were, USA phenomenons, but were growing in the UK. But we didn't have one in Sunderland. And basically what they're there to do is to be a voice for business within a city centre boundary. And it was really important that we took all of the businesses, big and small, along that journey with us, because they have to vote and you have to go through a proper kind of voting procedure, which we worked with the City Council to do. But the important thing is they have the potential to bring and access millions of pounds worth of funding. Mm-hmm. So in my inimitable fashion, I gathered a team around me and worked right across the business community and with the local authorities to bring our first business improvement district. And we did that in 2012. They have to get voted in every 5 years. We're in the second term now. Mm-hmm. And I was reminded again today that the next time it has to get voted in is 2024. So
wow, not far away.
So it's not far away. But that has really been underpinning, I think, to the transformation of the city, because it's given us a voice at the table to bring the right people into the city to ignite the transformational change. And that's not just the people who are at the leadership team within the city council who are responsible for all this change, but also welcoming investors and investment. And I guess this takes me all the way back to the job that I did within Northern Rock. I was used to speaking at that level and encouraging people to come in and see the future of the city. And I can't be more prouder than I can see within Sunderland today all of the transformation around the Riverside development.
I was just going to say, you're really starting to see that now, aren't you? All that groundwork and all that effort that you've put in over more than a decade.
And I can't take all the credit for that. You know, I'm just kind of the person who can connect people to do great stuff. And hopefully, you know, everybody who works here, who lives in Sunderland, can really begin to see that transformational difference. And I know we've got a long way to go. I know we've got a terrible train station, but it is being redeveloped. And I know the retail experience is still lacking and wanting. But hopefully you can start seeing, because of businesses, if big businesses can come into Sunderland, it creates demand and it creates footfall and it creates other great businesses to come in. So we've got a botanist that's coming, you know, all those.
Wow, it's exciting.
You know, great food and drink and beverage things.
Absolutely.
Much more to come on that score as well. So,
of course, the most important part of the Riverside Sunderland redevelopment is very close to the trust, and that's our new eye hospital, which will hopefully see some work start on that next spring.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that? It's obviously a big part of our ambition for the future, but great that that's finally coming to fruition as well.
Super excited about that, because I think the eye hospital has had many, many decades of just being such a fantastic hospital and does amazing stuff, from research and development to really being one of the 3 major centres in the UK. And I'm super proud that it's part of who we are and part of the fabric of our trust. But I think the buildings were quite tired. It was in the middle of a residential area, which on the one hand has been fantastic because it's been at the heart of our community. So we have to work really hard to ensure that people have great accessibility to the new hospital. But I'm super excited because I think the building itself leads itself to being, you know, modern and new, and will enable us to attract the best clinicians, but still deliver a service which is really at the heart of the community that we serve, not just in Sunderland and South Tyneside and the region, but actually we have national people who will come to see our eye hospital for really what it is. Yeah. Super proud of that one.
That makes 2 of us. And we've got lots of things happening in South Tyneside as well. So in terms of particularly on the hospital site redevelopment and the new integrated diagnostics centre, which is coming along at pace now. I don't know the last time you were on site in South Tyneside, but the building's pretty much up now and we're just working on the interior. How much of a, I guess, important development is that for the trust and for patients, most importantly?
Yeah. Well, again, I'm just so excited to see the development. And I know it was one of the things that our communities, our patients and our staff were really nervous about at South Tyneside. You know, would we get gobbled up by the whole big Sunderland thing, and would we get left behind? Would it feel like we were a second relation? I hope you get a sense that I'm very passionate because I've lived in South Tyneside and have my DNA there really in many respects, with my school and my children being born there. So passionate about making sure that we grow the site at South Tyneside, and we have loads more developments that we can't really talk about, but I'm really, really excited about the next wave. So to answer your specific question, I was there just last week. It's brilliant to see the new diagnostic centre, and that seems to have just shot up in such a short space of time.
It really has. Our office backs onto it, and it's all of a sudden it's there. It's really exciting to see. Really exciting.
And But that's way more important for our patients that we serve, that they get the best possible care within that, brand new, fantastic environment as well, and that's what we're about.
And that's one of the things, post-COVID, people getting their access to the diagnostic tests and scans. So within the facility, we'll have the MRI scanners, CT scanners, but one of the real things that we're most proud of is that we're going to have a PET CT scanner, which for people who are listening who are not familiar with that, it's a specialist scan that our patients currently have to go down to Middlesbrough or up to Newcastle, and it's often used in cancer diagnosis. So to have one of those in South Tyneside is a real coup for the trust, I think, and for the patients that are going to benefit from it.
So I don't use this word lightly, but I would say it's a game changer for the trust and for the populations of both South Tyneside and Sunderland as well. The more we can do within the communities that we serve, the better it is, because I'm a real advocate for trying to, the word levelling up is bandied around a bit, but we do have some sick populations between South Tyneside and Sunderland, and we can't disadvantage them by having to send them to places that they're not used to travelling. So I do think it's really important that we are very sighted on the immediate needs of the communities that we serve. So to see that and to see the PET scanner being there to serve directly our own populations is just brilliant. It's great, and it's the start of many things that
absolutely.
I
have noted the other exciting developments, so we'll have to get you back for another episode. Yeah. But there's some things happening within the hospital too that's worth mentioning, because people probably won't see them, but we've got a new intensive care unit that is pretty much nearing completion as well, which is fantastic, and it'll bring the facilities right up to date in South Tyneside, and we've just opened a new endoscopy suite there as well. So the general public, hopefully you're not having to use these facilities, but patients and people that are in there can hopefully see all of the investment that we are putting into the local hospital in the borough.
Yeah, without a doubt, and it is fantastic to see. On one of my walkabouts when I was at South Tyneside, the environment, the intensive care environment, was one of the areas that the board had for concern, and that was one of the things that we were very keen to invest in. So having the opportunity to do that and to see the change that's happening down there, I think is fantastic. I say down there only because we're doing this interview here up in Sunderland. So
I can't believe how time is flying on this podcast. I've got a couple more questions, and then we'll wrap it up and look forward to inviting you back for episode 2 in the future. Away from work, Alison, how do you switch off, relax? You talked about your family life, but I think your kids have grown a bit older now. So what do you do? How do you look after your own health and well-being? And what's Alison like outside of work?
Oh, blimey. Well, I do have a busy family life because not only, I think, again, this comes back to kind of females in work. I've kind of done the full circle. So my parents are ageing. They've been a central part of where we are. They're in their late 80s now, and we have to do a bit more looking after our parents as well. So that keeps me very grounded as well in terms of where I am. I really feel very passionate about looking personally at my own health and well-being. So I do quite a lot of running. I'm absolutely hopeless, and what I would say is I'm probably more of a plodder, but it gets me out every day. So I set myself a target of at least 15 minutes every day just to put my trainers on and get out there. And I also believe really strongly as we age, particularly us females, of doing a little bit more kind of strength training and things like that. So I really believe in keeping as fit as I can. Mm-hmm. Some of the mad things I do. So myself and Sean, my husband, we do tandem riding. So people think that that's quite a genteel thing, and I've been sent many memes about people on their tandems. But we do tandem racing on racing bikes.
Wow, racing.
So we have supported the Foundation of Light. charity cycle ride every year. And so how we ended up doing that was Sean was a really great cyclist. He's grown up with cycles, and whilst I've been fit, I've never been a cyclist. And I went out with some people to see whether I'd be good enough to do the charity cycle ride, and they politely said to me, well, I think you might be a year off. So instead of saying, no, I don't think she'll ever get there. And that was probably because I hadn't been on a bike since I was 8-year-old and I had tassels in a basket on the last single bike that I had. But somebody just out of the blue said, well, why don't you do it on a tandem? And my husband said straight away, you must be kidding. And I went, what a great idea. So,
and the rest is history.
And the rest is history. So we've done some amazing things, and we have got better every year. So much so that we've cycled from Poland to Prague, from the east coast to the west coast of France. We've done Brussels to Paris.
Wow.
We've just done Pisa to Rome, which was in the summertime. We obviously had a bit of a break during the pandemic, but we're keen to get back on. So the thing about tandem riding is it's tough. It's really tough.
I can imagine it's even harder than trying to ride a normal bike, because
Well,
you've got to balance both of you on. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the thing you don't do very often is stop, because if you do, it's really hard to get going again. And we're both clipped in, so people say, oh, with me on the back, is it all done by the person on the front? Do I put my feet up? Well, I can assure you, it's really not
Clipped in, that
way.
means your feet are clipped into the pedals, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can't stop, and you're literally in tandem, and I understand what that means. So you can't stop. If one stops, we both stop. The first time I did it was Dublin to Sunderland, and we got a ferry in between. We didn't kind of cycle on water. But we fell off twice. He jumped off and I fell off.
Oh dear.
So it could
We
have
didn't
ended...
see you in Sunderland Royal A&E, did we?
Not quite. It could have ended our tandem riding career there and then, but we stuck with it. So yeah, and we get up to speeds of 47 mile an hour on the downhills.
Crumbs.
Our sweet spot is downhills and on the flats, because we really pick up speed. So we have to make up time on there, because when we hit the uphills, it's literally
Trouble.
like a juggernaut going up a hill. So that's a sample of what
Wow.
we do on the tandem.
Varied out of work activities.
Yeah. So the next thing we're doing, so I've climbed Kilimanjaro, so I love trekking and I love climbing, and had never done that. I challenged myself for my 50th birthday to do that. I'm 57 now, so I feel like an old bird. But I've continued to do those types of things. I actually cycled myself in the Masai Mara a couple of years in Kenya.
Yes.
And also climbed in the Atlas Mountains and done all kinds. So next week we're off to climb Machu Picchu, and for the first
Where's that?
time,
Sorry.
so that's in Peru.
Peru, right? Okay.
So it's at altitude. It's an 8-day trek. I'm doing it for a charity called COCO, which is Children of Comrades Overseas, and it provides education facilities, particularly for girls in East Africa. So it's absolutely an amazing charity, and we'll be doing that next week. And I've persuaded Sean to do it. He's never done my climbs before.
Right.
So this is the first time he'll be doing that. So yeah, that'll be
I
exciting.
don't know how you find the time to fit it all in. I feel exhausted just listening. So then, I guess that's brought us towards the end of our podcast. What's next? What's the next 6 months for you as chair? Anything on the horizon, or any things that you're looking forward to, particularly over the next 6 months, that you want to end on, or any final thoughts or comments?
So I'm very aware that we'll be hurtling into winter pressures, and actually it feels like we're already in winter by the actual volume of patients and service users that we've got. So our job is really, how do we support the organisation to scale up where we need to, and what is it that we need to put in place. So we're very much aware of that. For any nerds out there who really kind of understand the wider system, we have an integrated care system which came into being at the beginning of July, and we will be working at a regional level to see how we can support each other at a regional level. So from a board perspective, this will be where Ken and I will be focusing ourselves, our team and our board, to make sure that we can deliver the best possible safe care to our customers during the winter period, or to our patients during the winter period. So that's going to be real key focus. At the same time, we've got the eye hospital to build, so that's really exciting. And we've also got the diagnostic centre to get fitted out and get all that going, and open, our intensive care unit as well, and make sure in amongst all of that we've got these exciting developments, but we're very alert and aware to what's happening on the ground as well. So all I would say is to anyone who's listening, we're here for you. We will be getting the board out and about doing many, many more visits. We've really missed it during the pandemic. Be open and honest to us. We're there to listen, we're there to hear, not just the great stuff that's going on, but also we're here to hear, how it feels kind of at the coalface day in, day out as well, and how we can support you with all of the interventions we can put in place so that you can deliver brilliant care for our patients.
Alison, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of our People podcast. We hope you enjoyed it, and check out our other stories. Hit subscribe to keep up with the latest and catch up with what we've been up to on our Twitter, Facebook and Instagram pages. Just search for our name.